Welcome to this wonderful panel. I'm so excited to be here in the Mother City. It's a first for us as Democracy Unplugged, but it is also so apt to be just down the road from Parliament having this conversation a year on and almost a year away from local government elections. Closest to me, for all the viewers at home, is we've got Mr. Khalid Sayed. He's got two names, but he said that's the one he likes. He's the leader of the opposition in the provincial parliament, but he is also the spokesperson for the ANC in the Western Cape. Ms. Karabo Khakhau is the national spokesperson for the DA and a member of parliament. And Mr. Mkhuleko Hlengwa is deputy minister of transport and IFP member of parliament.
Spokesperson.
Say again?
Spokesperson.
Spokesperson.
That's the one.
Aibo. Mara, I need to learn that you're in your capacity as
As a minister.
yeah, leadership in the GNU. And our diversity hire this afternoon.
Donald Trump will be proud.
Oh, the Mother City's own, the Good Party General Secretary, Mr. Brett Herron. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
No hard questions. I'm going to start closest to me. No hard questions, right? So, GNU, here we are, sort of unprecedented. And for you as spokesperson here in the Western Cape, but also sitting in national for the ANC, is this the ANC's last gasp? We couldn't get 40%, we couldn't get 45% or 50%, simple majority, so last gasp for power, let's get everybody on our side. Or how is the ANC seeing this GNU and its role in it?
Thank you very much, and let me also thank you for the opportunity. I think it's we're having a GNU coalition discussion in the Western Cape. A very important place to have it because this province and this city is no stranger to coalition governance and to what we now see as a GNU. So look, it's not necessarily a last gasp, because if you look at the makeup of the government of national unity, and the GNU, which still remains open to other parties who wish to join, there's a variety of political formations. The ANC as the leading party, it's still the majority party in the GNU. So it's not a last gasp, because if we were to say that, no, look, we are desperate for power, we would have then just went with one or two or three political parties. It's about ensuring now that, look, the voters have spoken. Even voters who didn't vote have spoken. They stayed at home, and that also reduced some of our votes. They've spoken. They've said that we need to work together as political parties, regardless of our ideological fault lines, but agree to a statement of intent and a common purpose to take South Africa forward. And I think that's what we are doing. So, and you are best able to do that with as many voices around the table. We're also able to hold each other accountable. So for us, it's not a last gasp. It also lays a basis for us to also renew and to ensure that we improve our electoral performance and the manner in which we govern, not only nationally, but even in provinces. And here where we are the opposition, it has opened up another exciting possibility, going towards local government as a result of the GNU, the spirit of the GNU. We've been able to work even with political formations at local government level, whom we've never worked with before, such as the Freedom Front, for example, in certain municipalities. It's opened up more possibilities. Even the manner in which we've approached opposition politics in the Western Cape. We are now able to hold the governing DA-led the DA-led Western Cape government, we're now able to hold them accountable based also on the medium-term development plan, which they have embraced at the national level, based
okay.
on the statement of intent, and work together with a broader breed or a broader formation of opposition parties in the province who are with us in the GNU. Not that
So
we'll
I like
agree
the
on
two
everything.
things that you're saying there, and I'm going to pick up on those two and throw it to you, Karabo, to say statement of intent. This is a very big kind of bugbear, as it were, for the DA. Statement of intent. You go into this with a statement of intent. Is this GNU and what we've seen in the public sphere working for the DA, or is this an uneasy cohabitation? Speaking of that statement of intent, because we've seen you go to.
Yeah, hello, Phumi. And hello, everyone. Firstly, I'm super excited that we finally got to budget 3.0. And we got there with a fight, some dragging our feet.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, because the Democratic Alliance's participation in the GNU has always been on the basis of one clarity, that even though we're in this marriage, which we're not in love with the partner in the marriage with, but we're there because we understand that, shame, the kids need a parent, at least one of them needs to be sober. But we're there, and in the best interest of South Africans, we'll fight, right? But we're very clear that we're not going to reduce ourselves to rubber stamping ideas that don't work and have shown themselves in the past years that do not work. So circle back to the statement of intent. Statement of intent has always been very clear to say that any policy or program of government needs to be rolled out on the basis of a consensus, a majority consensus, that is to have at least 60% of the partners within the GNU in agreement of the position. Now, within the GNU, there are only two political parties, and Askis Brett and Askis Hlengwa to say this. There are only two political parties within the GNU that constitute that consensus, right? And it sounds arrogant at first hearing to say that we're saying that we're the only people that matter, and that's not the point we're making. We made it because we understood that if we're going to go into a government that's going to hold stability, then the two main players within the coalition need to at least be able to find each other, and then we can move. So the question of whether the participation of other political parties in their rainbowness was a matter of the ANC not wanting to share their pie or not wanting to hog onto power is answered in very clear terms. The reason why you couldn't just go with the DA alone is because they knew that they're going to have a headache with the DA alone. So they must have at least somebody in the corner of Patriotic Alliance, somebody in the corner of Good, somebody in the corner of IFP, so that if the DA gives you a headache, at least you can rally onto their support, even though that support is not a majority unless you go outside of the scope of the GNU as they did, right? But the fundamental lesson here for us in the GNU and for South Africans is that we learned throughout this process so far, the first year, is that for the first time South Africa has a true democracy in its government. And that's something we should be clapping for. It's not cute. It's very tiring. It's exhausting because it has never been done before, right? And perhaps we need to then have learned to be less nasty towards each other in how we handle the politics of the country, because ultimately it's not just about the political egos in the room. It is about the people of South Africa. So our conflict resolution mechanisms are supposed to be one that reflect the authority that the people of this country expect their government to have and the respect they have of them. But as for would we still disagree as the Democratic Alliance on the points that we've disagreed on, given till to date? Hell yeah. Because those things matter. Those things speak to whether or not people are going to pay, we're going to pay more for nappies, for baby formula, for school shoes, for food. They speak to whether the people of this country were going to have an agenda of government financing that is focused on economic growth, job creation, or just the rubber stamping of what has been the past 31 years. I've said a lot.
Interesting that you start out by saying that the kids need a grown-up in the room, and at the same breath say that you don't believe that it is infantilizing to the other parties. And Mr. Hlengwa, I'll bring you in here to say, also the IFP has positioned itself as a stabilizing force within this GNU, right? And you've said, we're coming into the GNU because we have a particular set of expectations and how we would like to see government move forward. Do you believe that what you came into the GNU with has been delivered on? And do you think that it is working for the people and for your party?
Thank you very much. Good evening. I think let's start off with the elephant in the room, which is the arrogance which prevails in how we approach matters. We are not some people in a corner. No. And we're not speaking here about any party that has won the majority, because the inverse of the argument made is to presuppose that you have a majority. You alone can't do anything either. And so you need to disabuse yourself, the DA, of this condescending big brother attitude which seeks to undermine, which seeks to call us backup singers, yes, on SABC. So, and that's the problem. And why that is a problem is the construct of the GNU is not just confined at the national level. There is a GPU in KwaZulu-Natal. Are we now in that arrangement, some people in a corner, when we're leading that government? So you need to look at this construct in totality. You need to look at what it brings for local government in cities like Umhlatuze, where we have been working very well with the DA. The spoiler comes from the top, where there is just this overbearing and nauseating outlook to be arrogant. And it's got to stop, because it does not create a conducive and enabling environment to have the difficult and necessary conversations which punctuate what we're supposed to be doing in government. There's a statement of intent. There is the medium-term development plan, which we have all agreed to, which consolidates all the manifestos of political parties and defined 3 key areas of focus. Now, that is the common goal, right? We go to the issue of the budget. There too, the assumption that there was one messiah out of a quagmire is problematic. When you understand that the initial budget had a proposition of a 2% VAT increase, which was rejected across the spectrum. The fundamental lesson in the past 10 months is that this kind of government is a government of compromises. It's a government of tough decisions, and it is a government that requires all of us to see each other. And I believe fundamentally that it's fast lacking in certain quarters. The GNU clearinghouse mechanism was established precisely for the purposes of being a proactive action step when there's disagreements as a deadlock breaking mechanism. And we need to be able to give it space and time to work, because the question becomes, then where else do you solve the problem? Do you want to solve them amongst 2 partners? When there's other people and there's other ramifications, there's other constructs elsewhere? Where we must really be clear is the fact that the negotiations did not result in a grand coalition of the DA and the ANC. And the DA needs to accept that there's other partners, and disabuse itself if it is honest about the unity building project of this country. This isolationism is wrong.
Okay, so speaking of the other partners, and I think, Brett, this is a good time to bring you into the conversation, representing one of the smaller parties within the GNU, how you fight for your space, if any, and if you feel that there is just as much weight in the decision-making processes, in when there are areas that need to be worked out, ironed out. Do you feel that even as a smaller party, and I mean, the leader of your party has retained her position as a minister, which she had in the last administration too. Is it across the board that people, the smaller parties, have as much of a voice in the room?
Yeah, Phumi, I think we have to acknowledge that size doesn't matter, but really the cogency of your arguments, the cogency of the propositions that you put forward, ultimately prevail. And I can use a few examples. Firstly, when the statement of intent was being drafted and the ANC was engaging with all these parties, when we went up and saw the statement of intent for the first time, there were two things missing from it. There was no commitment to spatial transformation, which is a key good policy, and there was no commitment to protecting or defending the social wage, so the social grants that millions of South Africans rely on. And we insisted that those things be in the statement of intent. And they are now in the statement of intent that all 10 parties signed, but they were not in there in the first iteration of it. And we certainly influenced that policy decision, or those commitments that 10 parties have now made to addressing spatial transformation or spatial injustice, and to expanding our social wage, which wasn't in the statement of intent. If I come to the clearinghouse, it's interesting. I mean, the DA, there's two things that I want to disagree with. I don't think it's correct to say that this is the first time we have a real democracy. We are in the 7th parliament. We've had 6 democracies, which are one where a party won a majority vote on a universal franchise. That's democracy. If there's another definition of democracy that the DA would like to use, some sort of qualified franchise, then they must tell us. But really, we've had 6 democracies since 1994, and this is the 7th one, and it's a different form of democracy in terms of how the government is created. But let's go to the statement of intent and the influence. The DA talks often about consensus and sufficient consensus, but they've never once used those clauses. They've never invoked them. They've never asked the clearinghouse to deal with any dispute where they have disputed something on the basis of clause 18 and 19 of the statement of intent. The Bella Act, which is the only substantive thing that the clearinghouse, which is the dispute resolution mechanism that exists within the GNU, and it's meant to resolve disputes that arise out of cabinet or out of the parties that are in the GNU. The only substantive issue that that clearinghouse has dealt with has been the Bella Act, the Basic Laws Amendment Act, and that didn't come through from a dispute in the GNU or from cabinet. It was raised in the first clearinghouse meeting by the DA's representative and added to the agenda incorrectly, I think, because there needs to be a dispute in the GNU before matters referred to the clearinghouse. And then in the clearinghouse, the 4 parties that resolved or had to work together to resolve the Bella Act was good, the ANC, the DA, and the Freedom From Plus. Now, you're right, we're the smallest party in Parliament, but we were one of 4 parties tasked by the Deputy President to solve the Bella Act. And ultimately, the position that Good and the ANC put forward was the position that the President implemented. So we're small, but we use our intelligence, our emotional intelligence, because I agree with my colleague that there's an arrogance that the party that claims to be there to stabilize the marriage walks out every now and again. So they're not very stabilizing. But we have used our intelligence, our experience, and our commitment to this country to guide us and to influence a government that we are part of.
So has the GNU allowed for a more robust parliament? Do you think it's allowed for a more robust way of dealing with issues in parliament, with legislation, with all of the work that parliament has to do? Has it allowed for a more robust one?
So as for me, yes. And the reason why I want to circle back on what Brett had to say, he can be as academic as he wants about what democracy actually is. But the bottom line is, even though we've had multiple parties represented in parliament in the other administrations, it is the first time in this administration that we have a representation of multiple political parties in government. So the point... No, hear me. Obviously, in the beginning, we've had the transition. Okay, I thought I didn't have to explain this, but okay. So obviously,
Yeah,
in the
but no,
beginning of
you're
our
going
transition,
to have to explain it because
I
it's
realize this
factually
now.
incorrect.
Yes,
yeah.
I realize this now. So
Okay.
let me explain it. And as Kisi for assuming that everybody's hearing what I'm not saying. So obviously, in the transition period from apartheid, we had the amalgamation of other political parties, and we had Inkatha there to represent, right? And then obviously in the previous administration, we also had. Hold on.
No, don't
Let
invoke.
her, no, no,
Hold on.
let her
Mustn't
finish.
invoke us incorrectly.
No, no, you
let
can.
her
The
finish and then you can
1994
come back
government
to
was
it.
a constitutional dictate that parties with 10% or more will be in government.
Let her
Not
finish.
this.
Making
Let her
though.
finish her statement, and then we can come back.
Yes, and that's the point. But anyway, it's fine. So the point I'm making is, and even after the academic expression of what translated, what pushed then the representation of government's composition, then after that we've had the 5 elections thereafter that happened, and all the administrations, and then we had this one in the 6th administration where we saw good representation. The point I'm making is, for the first time, we have a political party in government that doesn't have the power to govern alone, which means that, in democratic terms, not only is Parliament robust and representative of majority of the political parties within the country, but government seats itself are representative of those political parties. That means, for the first time, government's composition is far more democratically representative of the aspirations of South Africans than we have seen in the past. That is the point I'm making. And whether or not that is a good thing is where we are going with this, right? And it is a good thing. Because the biggest frustration, which is part of the reasons why most South Africans who say they haven't voted, one of the reasons they've listed to say that they haven't voted is because they are tired of having only one person representing them in the room and not seeing what other people within the political sphere are doing with the power that has been given to them, right? And I think it's a good thing that we have more than 2 or 1 political parties within government that can directly go report to their constituencies about what their manifesto beyond the legislative arm of state translate to as far as the direct service delivery is concerned. That is very important, and that's something that we should celebrate. And whether or not the marriage is uncomfortable, it was designed to be uncomfortable. It was designed to be painful because none of us here go out and campaign to all of you and say, vote for myself and Hlengwa. Obviously, we did the Moonshot Pact, which translated into the multi-party charter, right? And we did that. Still, even doing so, we were saying, still vote for me, and if it doesn't work, then vote for Hlengwa and I, right? But the principle is, none of us want to go govern with another political party because we do not agree, 1, on an ideological basis of what the country should look like. 2, on the basis of that, do not agree on our manifesto propositions on what service delivery should look like and how government should be rolled out. So because we inherently don't want to share power, general, and it's a lie for anybody representing any political party here to say that they're happy to share because they
I don't think you can speak on behalf of
No,
them.
it would be a lie. I'm saying for a fact, as a politician, that there is no political party that wakes up and finds formation and says they want to represent this country and does so on the basis of, okay, Shane, you know what, my ideas are great, but maybe I can share them with other people. We're forced to do that, and we're grateful, actually, that the country has pushed us into a direction where we have to get over our egos and have to get over our own singular ideas as political parties and have to share how we govern this country with other
I
parties.
think I'm going to allow Mkhuleko, you can jump in here, and then we'll come back to you, Khalid, and then we'll come to you.
I regret that this is the turn we're taking because the fundamental truth is, rightly or wrongly, the South Africans have gone to the polls since 1994 and they've made a choice. That's democracy, and I do not think we should diminish it because, and then when you want to qualify it and say a real democracy, what's an unreal one? It's a dictatorship, right? Now, we have all campaigned with the primary outlook of pushing the ANC below 50% and out of power, right? That's democracy, and it has been achieved. because I don't think it would be a fair characterization to the voters to say that they've participated in what's undemocratic. Secondly, is this: in one way or the other, this country has had touches with coalitions at local government level, at provincial level, and at national level. The interim constitution prescribed, it was a constitutional injunction, that parties with 10% or more will be in the executive. What the NP chose to do at a later stage is their own decision. In KwaZulu-Natal, under no obligation, which was constitutional, we invited the ANC to participate in the provincial government as a peace arrangement to stabilize the province. At some point, we worked in that province with the DA participating in our government. So the whole notion I'm trying to get at is that since 1994, the country has found itself with various constructs of democracy. Let me extend it a bit. In Parliament, we have had presiding officers of the House from the DA elected by the majority, which was the ANC, right? Within Parliament itself. For all its sins, the ANC, and yes, many will say I'm a beneficiary of this and one or other, but it doesn't matter, has been true to the commitment that SCOPA will be chaired, or the convention that will be chaired by an opposition, ensuring that with its majority, it does not deviate from established global democratic precedents. The very same parliaments that we refer to were the ones that a DA motion for impeachment passed, not with their majority, right? So whatever wrongs may be in our country, the one thing we must never do is water down or dumb down the strength of our democracy, strengthened by our institutions as well, including Chapter 9 institutions, where it could have been easy for a majoritarian government to shut down all those things. Has it been perfect? Far from it. I mean, the honest truth is that when you look at the developmental outlook, these guys have stuffed up, right? There's a mess, whether it's economic growth, whether it's on service delivery, and so on. There is a mess. But that mess must not, at the very least, take away at what this country has managed to achieve of sustaining its democracy and a smooth transfer of power, by the way, last year, because that's what it was. That's what has happened here in the Western Cape when the ANC lost power and the DA took over. That's what has happened in KwaZulu-Natal, the most volatile province. No, in what happened in 2004 when we lost power, we sat on the opposition benches. So we need to be very careful about how we frame this government and say, whoa, for the first time. No. The test, actually, as far as I'm concerned, of this government is service delivery. It's what those in office will do, and that's the conversation we should be having.
Well, speaking about kind of opposition benches and not being in the opposition benches, but rather still holding on to the power. Oh, you okay?
This fella, I was trying to put the coffee down.
Okay. You wanted to jump in first on that, and then I'll ask the question again.
No, I wanted to jump in, but I think I've been covered by the colleague of the GNU, IFP colleague, and by Good at the beginning. I think, look, we should be very careful. We are looked at as South Africa. There's already been an attempt by a certain part of our population to undermine the image of our country. We've seen what that has done in the United States. Let us not, as politicians and as leaders of parties, particularly parties that are in government nationally, feed into that and entrench that notion. So to say that only now we are a true democracy, that feeds into the thing that ever since 1994, under a black government, post-apartheid South Africa has failed to be a democratic South Africa. That's totally unacceptable and that's not healthy. And I want to add, even after the 1994 government, even when the ANC had a 2/3 majority, it invited. There were other political parties part of cabinet, for example. In the Thabo Mbeki era, we had even deputy ministers from the DA. Azapo. Even when President Zuma was president of the country, the Freedom Front Plus held the position of deputy minister of agriculture. Peter Mulder was the deputy minister of agriculture. So this culture has been there, and the ANC has been part and parcel and has led in this regard. Let me take you locally, because we're in the Western Cape. We formed government not too long ago in Cederberg. There's the ANC, an organization known as Cederberg Eerste. And we had the opportunity to form government on our own, without anybody. We invited the Freedom Front Plus. And the Freedom Front Plus didn't vote with us against the DA mayor and the DA speaker, but they form part, and they're not Scopa, because what Scopa, or what do they call it at the local government level? MPAC. MPAC is oversight. That's not part of government. We've put them as part of the executive. But let me take it further, and we're talking about the spirit of the GNU in the Western Cape. And I must say, I'm not necessarily bashing the DA, because even in 1999, when the DA won the province, the DA included Lynn Brown as a deputy speaker. So they reached out. Last term, the ANC held the Scopa chairpersonship in provincial parliament. But what happened this term? The DA, even though there's a GNU, the DA have become, and I think there's a trend, and the DA needs to speak to this. I think there's been an erosion for the appreciation of democracy and oversight on the part of the DA. Now you're starting to see, in the Western Cape, for example, the ACDP, that's a rubber stamping formation of the DA in the Western Cape, gets the
But
Scopa.
they're not here to speak on their behalf.
You know,
But I want to jump in and say
there has
this.
been a lack of appreciation, even for smaller political parties. The fact that they call the IFP and others as those who are just along with us in the room, that's unacceptable.
Okay, so I think we have definitely, we've dealt with that particular issue. And I want to jump in. I mean, it's all well and good for the four of you to be sitting here who are part of the GNU, who feel that your voice is being heard, your party is being well represented. Brett, and I'm going to bring this to you to say, do you think that the public feels that this is a working coalition, or it's actually just, power being concentrated in the hands of the elites, and these guys are all going to work together now to keep power on their own, and it's not going to filter down and deliver for the people? Do you think the public see it the way that you may see it here?
I think it's an interesting question, and I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that. I mean, you can follow conversations on social media, and that's not necessarily reflective of the voting public or the public that is entitled to vote. But I think that the way in which the GNU is operated and this fracas around the budget, the fact that the DA, for example, is in the GNU but will take things to court instead of trying to resolve them in the GNU, is communicating to the public that coalitions are not stable, and that I think there's a danger in that. The DA wants to define democracy as being something that is more aligned to coalition politics as the outcome of a democratic process. But what the manner in which this GNU is operating now, I think, is possibly communicating to the public that coalitions are unstable and bring a lot of chaos into your personal life. And that, I mean, I have no basis for saying it other than following social media conversations, reading articles by commentators, that the way in which the coalitions, not just the GNU, but even local government coalitions, they are unstable. And I think people get tired of motions of no confidence, of removing people, of changes. So I think there's a danger in the way in which the coalition government at the national level is operating that is going to alienate voters from the democratic process, because it is not really projecting, as Karabo would like it to be, that we are working together representing different constituencies as a new form of democracy. I don't think it's communicating that to voters clearly enough. And I think there's a danger that it actually will undermine participation.
Before I let you respond to that, I have a question, and any one of you can take the question. Speaking of the precarious nature and the chaos that we've all been watching over the past, and quite honestly, probably has been more at the fore because of the budget and the process around the budget. I'm wondering how you navigate your party line, the government line, and the responsibilities within government and within the various portfolios. And I mean, any one of you can take that. Let's start with you and we'll come to you, okay?
Yeah, look, thank you. It's a very complex balancing act because there's the medium-term development plan, which is the agreed-upon minimum program by government. And so the expectation is that it becomes the yardstick measure or the benchmark of whatever anyone is doing. But at the end of the day, we are all in different departments, and therefore the challenges that prevail within your department and your space may at times be at odds or at variance with the MTDP. At the same time, you may find that what you find or inherit in the department will be at odds with your own party positions. I mean, I'm having to navigate quite a lot of things within the transport ecosystem as well. But there has to be a yardstick measure. The second point around that is, for me, all that we have seen are necessary teething problems for the new construct that we have, because it allows us to set up the necessary checks and balances and mechanisms or precedent for what will happen in future to manage such a situation. So I don't see it as a crisis, but I see it as, one, an opportunity to learn and for us to pick up the fault lines in terms of where they are. What we must avoid at all costs is the phenomenon of being half pregnant. Either you are or you're not. There's no in between. And so there is a responsibility to be in government in total. And where I have observed to be a problem is twofold. One, you've got an ANC that it has not drilled in that they are below 50%. It's not there. Two, you've got a DA where it has not drilled in that they're not the opposition but in government. Because what you mustn't do is to be in government when it's convenient, and when it goes pear-shaped, then no, I'm opposition and I'll run to court. Why do I say this? I can't in good faith face South Africans when things go wrong in transport with Minister Creasy and then say, that was the government. No, I will have to own the good, the bad, and the ugly, not this good. All right? For when today, I'm saddled with the situation of the CEO of REF who has been placed on special leave, one of the most complicated and complex things. And how it plays out in the end, I will have to own the outcome, right? Which will come with its own sins. But at the same time, tomorrow, Minister Creasy and I are going to be on the Crisani line of the Central Line relaunching PRASA. So I can't say, yes, we're doing good there, and then no, because REF has got problems, it's not my problem. No. So there has to be a heightened discipline from all of us to be government, whatever that may mean, but be it. We will still campaign. We will still criticize each other. We will still disagree. But how we do it must also inspire confidence in the public that there's maturity in the room to have the tough and difficult conversation.
Karabo, you are shaking your head and agreeing at the same time. I don't know what's going on with you. Okay.
And I don't think we achieve that by having a default position, which is premature in this sense, that at the sight of a disagreement, you run to court. Because what you then do, you politicize the court system, which is dangerous.
Okay. Karabo, I don't know which one you're starting with the shaking your head or the agreement. Which one do you want to start with?
I'll find my way through it.
Okay.
And that's what government is in a coalition setup, finding yourself through it, right? And I make reference to that deliberately. So being in a government with other political formations means that when we do not agree with each other, then in the spirit of the beautiful democracy everybody is praising, you use all the levers of the democratic state to get to the outcome that is in the best interests of South Africans. Remember, we did not wake up from day one on disagreement on the budget and go to court from the day one. We tried to resolve internally, right? The same submissions that Godongwana made now last week on our fiscal plan are the same submissions that Sarupen made with budget 1.1, 1.0. But Godongwana didn't want to hear them then, right? And I'm not deliberately here. I'm not going to engage on how good and the IFP in that moment featured in the conversation, but I'm talking about the principal conversation with the ANC at the point as far as the budget is concerned. We tried. It didn't work. We tried the second time. You would know that there are standing commitments that exist between their SG and our equivalence of the SG, which is the federal chairperson of Federal Council, Mezela, where those conversations are supposed to happen, right? There was a breakdown in between there. Some meetings were held, some when we got there, Figile doesn't pitch. It's a mess, right? And then we are left the one morning in the middle of a negotiation on the thing. We're waiting for the president to say yes or nay on this issue, still parking the other people within the which he deliberately did, which the ANC deliberately did. They parked the rest of the negotiating, the rest of the GNU partners aside and strictly focused on this conversation, right? Whether that was wise, that's a different conversation to have for tomorrow. They parked that and we're still waiting for him to resolve. He doesn't do so and he just ghosts us in the middle of the conversation, right? And we still go back and say, okay, but don't ghost me because, I'm in this relationship with you. If you want the marriage to work, don't ghost me. Let's talk. You don't have to like what we say to each other, but we have to talk. They don't do so. What must we do? We have a responsibility in government, yes, to show up in good and in bad times. But if a decision is on the table that brings about a constitutional or legislative question, which other arm of state are we supposed to use other than the arm of state that is empowered to deal with judicial matters, if not the courts, right? So that's what happened. And it's fair to say, and I understand the criticism around we are in opposition one day, but then we're in government the other day. Again, there has to be an understanding of, I can't speak for the other political parties, but I can speak for the DA with authority. There has to be an understanding of what it means for the Democratic Alliance to be in the GNU and how the Democratic Alliance chooses to participate. Being in a healthy coalition doesn't mean we have to agree with everything. That's the point. And that's how I ended up calling Hlengwa and the other political parties backup singers. And I own that. The reason why I ended up doing so was because of this. You can't, as a matter of principle, communicate to say that you are anti a VAT hike, that South Africans shouldn't be hiked, shouldn't be taxed more for revenue collection. And then you vote in favor of that, and then you justify it to say, no, the reason we're doing so because it is good for the stability of this country. Then it means what is at value is the relationship of the GNU and not the people of South Africa. And we had multiple conversations with the DA, within the DA about it's hard because it looks like we are throwing our toys out of the court. It looks like we don't want to be in the relationship. But the bottom line is, who do we choose? Do we choose the GNU and the stability of having a cozy relationship with our partners in bed? Or do we choose South Africans? Now, moving on to the issue of what has the GNU been able to do for South Africans so far, because I think that's a conversation that's still missing that we need to have. What we need to be able to judge the GNU on is on the ministers and the deputy ministers' work. Are they doing better or not? Is the economy growing? Is it not? Are we able to move the needle as far as expanding job creation opportunities for South Africans or not? As far as economic growth is concerned, we're not there yet. Even with job creation, we've lost ways, we've seen an increase in some sections, but we've seen decreases in some sectors of the job as well, which doesn't speak to a healthy economic picture for the country, which is what we want to be able to see ultimately. As far as the job of the ministers is concerned, I can easily say my ministers, I think they're the best in the GNU because of the work and the rollouts that they've been able to roll out, right?
Ma'am, I think you're a little bit conflicted when it comes to that, but Brett wants to say something and then I want to do a sense check.
Yeah, I wanted to, I think it's important that, look, I understand the argument around the levers of democracy are many, and they include the courts, and the right to go to court is obviously there. But I think that the messaging around the reason why the DA was in court around the budget is different to what actually they were litigating in court. So they politicized the budget and the VAT hike, but in court they were arguing something completely different. And there's no party that voted for a VAT hike. And that's what they were in court about. They were in court arguing that the Minister of Finance should not have the power to announce an increase in VAT in a budget speech, and therefore VAT increases.
So I think
so no party voted. No.
Just finish that point. But I do want us to not get too bogged down in tiny detail that we can all go and read up on, because I do want us to move on the bigger conversation, and I also want to open up to the floor.
No, maybe it is a tiny point, but the point is about bad faith, because you are in government together, and you are publicly saying that these parties all voted for a VAT increase when no party did, including all the parties in the GNU, and you're in court saying something different, and you're not saying what you're saying in court to the public. So it's a partner that acts in bad faith, and that's not healthy for the GNU or the coalition.
I'm going to pick up on this just now, but let me do a sense check with the audience, because we are 50 minutes into this conversation, and I want to open up for questions. If you can just do a show of hands so we can see who wants. There's one at the back, there's one in the front here. Okay, so Sia, let's start with the one at the back. Yes, ma'am, I see you with the glasses. And then we're going to come here. We're going to take your question. Please try and make it concise. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your question and I'm going to...
Too many things on. We're having a tear-tear.
Sorry, coalitions work like this.
So I'm going to take the question and I'm going to take an answer. Because I don't want us to get lost in too many questions. So, sir.
The DA's subversion of our sovereignty has led directly to negative impacts which are designed to make us a pariah state. The DA's delegations to a scene of genocide is disgusting. At the local level, we have the DA Cilliers Brink opposing Jordan Neal Lewis to raise rates and tariffs. It's schizophrenic. And the DA person said that we don't have to agree with everything. But the DA doesn't even agree with itself. My question is, why should South Africans trust the Democratic Alliance, given its proven track record of experience, unreliability, and outright subversion of our constitutional democracy?
Okay. That was very loaded. Please, can I deal with all of them? Because that was more than one question, right? Let's first deal with the issue of the visit to Israel. The Democratic Alliance did not send those people there. Your Glenys Breitenbach, your... What's the other people? Emma Powell, the Liam Jacobs, Umama Sango, the whole lot. I think there was 10 of them that went there. Madikizela, all of them. There's 10 of them that went there. I can say without fear of any contradiction that those people did not go there sent on an official Democratic Alliance visit. I can tell you for a fact caucus fought, even with Emma Powell herself, who's our spokesperson on international relations, to ask, but on whose authority did you go there? You can't go as a DAMP on a trip that generates that much controversy and then engage in a political narrative when you can't divorce yourself from being a DAMP. I can't go to the beach in a thong and shake my ass on a yacht and forget that I'm the DA spokesperson and think that my voter bases are going to not think anything about that, because the bottom line is the minute I said, so help me God, I signed the DA membership and I said, yes, send me to parliament, I understood that I can't divorce myself from those things. So, and so it must be clear to everybody that those people that went there went on a trip that was paid for by not the Democratic Alliance, that was not sanctioned by the Democratic Alliance. They went there on their own accord. So the documentary they had and whatever utterances they had, not even FedEx approves or said that they must go there. So that must be clear. So that's true, we should. And on the question of, no, we should.
Okay, let's let her complete her responses.
We should discipline anybody that engages in activities that put the party's name in disrepute. That is correct across board. Equally, people must then take accountability themselves. One other question you're asking about why these people went there. I want you to please go ask Linus Breitenbach. Please ask all of them. Ask those people why they went there, and then even I will be enlightened to know what they were doing there, right? So that's one. So we should be fair in how we judge the DA and who does what. That was a personal trip, it wasn't a DA trip. Number two, on Tshwane versus the city of Cape Town, on the
Cleaning
on
tariff.
the rates. The conversation happened, I'll be transparent with you. It does look odd to say, okay, the other metros, we have DA representatives that are saying the cost of living is too high and that the rates should be lowered. And then in the city of Cape Town where we govern, we have a mayor who's increasing the rates. So the conversation then is, with Jordan and Lewis, what necessitates the increase, right? And when we judge the current layout of rates in comparison to other metros, how does that work? Jordan then comes back to us with a clear comparison that says, look, it is correct that we still have a cost of living problem across the country. When you look at the rates valuation table of the city of Cape Town in comparison to other cities, the city of Cape Town is far, far, far lower, right? Which means forget the home bond itself and whether or not you can pay, life is more expensive in Cape Town or more expensive in Ekurhuleni. But as far as the table itself of the rates is concerned, I'm going to conclude.
I'm going to allow you to finish just that thought,
Yeah.
but I think that for the benefit of everybody else who's
Yeah.
also viewing, you may need to take the particulars around Cape Town and Joburg and cost of living
let me take
to
off my
a conversation over the cocktails. But I will ask you to deal with the bigger question
Yes,
that
okay.
comes with that, is how should the public trust the DA if within itself,
Yes,
inside? So that's why I'm saying, finish that thought and then let's deal with that, because that's more pertinent to a bigger audience.
I hear you. And the reason why I ask for indulgence is because I can't have a loaded question and not respond in a loaded way. That won't be fair, and it won't do justice to the person who's questioning. But I'll try to be succinct.
But yeah, it's for everybody.
So we then have I can't find it now in time because now I'm being patrolled.
Can I help with the question?
Hold on, Brett. So,
let's let her finish,
So-
and then we'll come back if you want to add something to the framing.
So be that as it may be, with the tabulation that then shows the cost for water, for electricity, for services, refuse removal, there's a whole table. I just can't find it right now because of time. It is in many WhatsApp groups. So he then gives us that justification, right, to say that is what's going on. But then he then undertakes a commitment himself as the mayor, which I'm sure residents of the city of Cape Town would have seen, a commitment to say that he will review to see what else is there that he can do to fit the bill of an increase, because ordinarily an increase doesn't exist unless there has to be a mandate that must be funded to ensure that service delivery is able to be upcapped at the standard that it is in Cape Town, which in comparison to other metros in this country is the best. It's not where it should be in the ultimate dreamland of what the city of Cape Town is supposed to be, but as far as comparison of refuse removal, as far as water provision, as far as road networks, and as far as efficiency is concerned, when you put it across the table of all the other metros in the country, we're still able to outperform. I will take it to cocktail to you so that I can give you the spreadsheet there, and you can see it there, because it lists Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, Johannesburg, eThekwini, there's a whole list there. And maybe if Phumi can be gracious enough, while other people answer, I'll look for it and then I'll respond and give you the details.
But then you haven't responded to the bigger question.
Oh, the trust of the DA. Oh, how do you trust then the Democratic Alliance that in one metro argues for the other thing and then in the other city argues? I think that's a valid question. I genuinely think it's a valid question, because at face value, it does seem like, okay, there you are fighting, but here you are not fighting. And I can't say I have a direct answer to that, but the best attempt I can give is this, right? In all fairness. When we speak about municipal budgets and the role that we play, we're able to be honest about whether or not the money that is being asked from the municipality meets the service delivery outcomes that have been communicated. And the question then is, has the city of Cape Town, as far as its ability to to give you water that is clean, reliable, and flows consistently, has they been able to do so? Have they been able to clean your streets? Have they been able to keep the street lights on? Have they been able to make sure that all other service delivery programs, as far as the renovation and creation of recreational facilities is concerned, as far as housing development is concerned, and being able to provide housing to the people, have they, yes, has the city of Cape Town used all its rands and cents optimally in a way that justifies their answer? And if you are of the opinion that the answer is no, then the city of Cape Town has to have an honest conversation about what they're doing with the money, and whether or not the Auditor General's assessment of the city of Cape Town's usage of the money is a lie. Because the issue is, yes, we have a broader scope that we need to cover. We still need to deal with spatial apartheid. We still need to deal, which is why we're dealing with the programs of social housing that exist to try and make sure that people come closer to economic participation hubs, while also understanding the limitations of the landscape of the city itself, given the water barriers of where you can build and where you cannot build, as far as making sure that in residential areas we have trucks that remove refuse, right, outside of illegal dumping, putting that on the side, right? As far as all of those are concerned, if the city of Cape Town has been able to do what the Auditor General says they're doing with their money, then it is fair. But if we are of the opinion that the city of Cape Town is not doing so, then that is a conversation worth having, because at the end of the day, audit outcomes must reflect the lived realities of the people on the ground, and whether or not their experiences of an efficient government across board, comparing the city of Cape Town with the rest of the country, is up to standard.
Brett, is yours a supplementary response, or is it an additional question?
I mean, Karabo speaks a lot, so I don't want to open the gates to have another long answer, but I wanted to just frame it more simply. It's not about tariffs. In Tshwane, they're arguing that the cleaning tariff is unlawful and unconstitutional, and in Cape Town, they're implementing it. So I don't think it's helpful to say, well, what are you paying? It's the concept that how can it be unconstitutional and unlawful in Tshwane, but not in Cape Town? And in Tshwane, AfriForum is helping the DA go to court to challenge it, but they're not challenging it in Cape Town. So I don't really want I think she's addressed it, but that's the hypocrisy.
Okay, understood. So, sir, at the front, we'll take your question.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing us back to democracy, because I heard the conversation earlier, which I must say I thought was a remarkable abstract and metaphysical conversation about what is democracy. Because I look at South Africa now, more than 40% unemployed people, millions of children going to sleep without enough food, and I think, what kind of democracy is that? And that seems to me to be the important question. And then I look at each of you political parties, all of you, in one bag. None of you have a strategy for escaping from this. And that's the problem. The story we're told is that there's corruption, and therefore privatization is the answer. We must privatize these services because the state is corrupt. And I ask myself, but who is the state corrupt with? It's corrupt with the private sector. And that is the problem. The problem is that the state has been dismantled over the last 30 years. Public works departments used to do work, to build roads, to fix roads. Now we have a contract. And many of those contracts don't work. But what does work is every time there is a contractual relationship between the state and a private contractor, there is an opportunity for corruption. So the answer to me is take away the opportunity, rebuild the state. And unfortunately, none of you stand for that. The DA, you look at me like that, but the DA actually stands for it less than anybody else. The DA wants to bring in the private sector more and more privatization. Recently we hear now privatization of water services. We hear not of water, but of water services. Have none of you looked at what has happened to the privatization of water services in other parts of the world? In the UK, Thames Water was privatized and then swamped itself in debt in order to pay its shareholders, because that's actually what a private company is for, is to feed its shareholders, and now is in a state of collapse, and so is the sewage system of the country. So privatization is not the answer. The budget, you can dicker about the VAT, but actually what we need is an expansionary budget, not a contracting budget. A budget which builds this country and builds the GDP of this country, GDP per capita falling constantly. So unless you come with a new macroeconomic strategy, you are all actually the same, unfortunately. And you can argue about your differences, but they're minute compared to the fundamental challenges that this country faces.
Thank you.
Can I
Okay,
answer?
so a statement.
I need to dispute something though.
Okay.
Yeah, even
So
I.
Karabo, we're gonna let Brett, and then we're gonna let Mkhuleko, and then I'll take a question at the back, and then I'll come back to you. So yeah, ngala.
Can I wanted to just dispute, first of all, that the Good Party stands for privatization, because we don't champion privatization. I agree with you 100% that privatization is not the answer to our challenges. There's a role for the state, a large role for the state, and it's historically been demonstrated to grow the economy and to grow jobs when the state is more active in the economy. So we don't have a position on privatization. And I agree with you that the budget 3.0 is probably worse than budget 2.0 that was tabled in March. And that is because we've cut expenditure in health, in education, we've cut expenditure to PRASA so they can do the signaling and upgrade the rail system, and we've introduced a fuel levy, which is going to burden everybody. We've cut the VAT exempt items. So we have had a contraction in return for what was quite a small increase in VAT in real terms. If you took, I'll just use this example, because people often talk about the poor, how the poor are affected. If you take a household that is living on the SRD grant of 370 Rand a month, and if they spent every single cent on VAT groceries that carry VAT, they would have incurred a 1 Rand 30 cents increase if we had increased from 15 to 15.5%. So I think the VAT debacle, we threw the baby out with the bathwater and we ended up with the worst budget.
Thank you. Let me start on this key question around expenditure in the budget. A fuel increase will increase expenditure for everyone across the board. Travel, logistics, cost of food, agriculture, the whole 9 yards, the whole value chain. I would have expected the anti-0.5% proponents to have been as vociferous if they were genuine about the 0.5. The second point is this. Corruption cannot be taken out of the equation. I served in Scopa for 10 years, 5 of which I chaired. And the inverse of the argument you make exists there as well. Because when you speak about the presence of the Guptas in the ecosystem of state-owned entities, which was supposed to give the state an upper hand in terms of its presence in the ecosystem and in the economy, was collapsed because of corruption. Let me make a very silly example, very silly, but with one which highlights more broadly the problem. South Africa's got the highest population of Indians outside India. Yet the route for SAA from South Africa to India, where there is a multiple clear reality of travel, was taken out in order to benefit something else. So the corruption must remain as part of the observed reality to be sorted out. I do not agree 100% with privatization being the roots of corruption. Where the corruption is in tenderpreneuring, where people with no skill set about a road construction will sit with a computer in this very nice holding room you held for us with a computer and tell us that they've got a business and lodge when they've never done anything. The state currently has been eroded and does not have the capacity to meet the developmental agenda of this country. So whilst you build state capacity, which is a GNU medium-term development priority, the reality is that you do need to leverage with the private sector. It does not mean have a wholesale selling off of state assets. The RFI that we've opened on Transnet does not say sell off the assets of the state, but we need investment and we need resources. We are in dire straits. That is the honest truth. We are in dire straits. I could use stronger language. So I think we must be fair to the moment, right? And the last point is this. I think ultimately where the country needs to be at is exactly where you have pointed us. And this is the point I made earlier on. It's less about the academic debate. And that's why I said it's about the performance of those who have been deployed to serve. That's the yardstick measure. That's what will make or break the GNU. And my own outlook is to say the teething problems, the construct problems, the formatting outlooks of how a government should be are one stream. But the question is, are those who have been deployed doing the work?
Yeah.
And that's the assessment we need to be doing.
Okay.
And I hope that in the next round of these important conversations, you can come and present the commitment and hold accountable to say, right, we have got a target, a country target of 250 million tons of logistics on Transnet movement by 2027. I need to be able to come and sit here and say, why haven't we achieved it? If we haven't achieved it, and how we achieved it if we did, and what we can do to do it. It needs to go down to that basic. Okay. And so that's why for me, service delivery, whatever it may mean, is at the heart of the important conversations we need to be having.
Okay, we'll take the question on this side.
First of all, thank you just to all of you just coming together and having a chat and disagreeing, because that is, in a lot of ways, it echoes where a lot of us as Africans are. These conversations are happening in people's living rooms all the time. The dinner parties happening every Friday, and people are sitting here and disagreeing and agreeing. So, in a way, it is illuminating and it is very educating as well. But I think the one thing I think a lot of us perhaps can get from this is that maybe I heard a long time ago I read something that said, be careful of the person who's certain, who says, no, this is the way. It's good to have dissenting voices to keep everything in check. So you need a yin to a yang. So this is important and it's necessary. But politics only means something to me where I live.
Sure.
As a tax-paying South African, what you disagree with ideologically, academically, is your business. I just need to know, am I getting load-shedded tomorrow?
Sure.
So since the GNU, you can mention so many things, but surplus, you go to Home Affairs, it's just a different experience now than it was perhaps 2 years ago. I haven't been load-shedded in a while, So in terms of what I can benefit as a tax-paying South African, that's the conversation I want to have with you, because that's what matters to me. What happens in Parliament when I'm not around is irrelevant to me, quite frankly. So we have the GNU, I am the child, to these two parents who are, I don't know, are they divorcing? Are they marrying? I don't care. It's unhappy, but I am that child, okay? So I would just like to know, as participants in this, we'll just say a 4-part marriage, because we only have 4 representatives today. We are entering a new month next month. We're entering June. So 6 months into the year, what is the ANC's, the DA's, the IFP, the Goods vision? Give me 3 succinct of what the GNU can achieve realistically, what you guys hope to achieve realistically, where it is going to affect me on a Monday to Sunday basis.
Sure.
I would love to hear that, because that matters to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 1 per person.
Or even better, Mama.
3. Let's start here.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to say, and because we are here, and it doesn't necessarily have to, and I think we need to just, the kind of question, it's a good question, but I think we need to start, and this is why, as a GNU, we've got a plethora of voices. We need to also, as South Africans, while we are talking to us as politicians, we should not only be thinking about what does the GNU mean for me, because it's essentially that kind of thinking that has permeated in the liberal world, that we think only of ourselves, that results in us not doing the right thing. I think we need to also think of what does the GNU mean for my neighbor? What does it mean for the child living in an underprivileged area, because we are a society? So for me, I want to say, as Brett has mentioned earlier, the Basic Education Law Amendment Bill is now an act. As the African National Congress, we are clear that at least at the level of basic education, we are going to be ensuring that there is that there's improvement of quality education for all. More people have got access to quality education. Schools, to take an example in the Western Cape, school governing bodies will no longer be able to operate like independent islands to exclude children from entering schools on the basis of race or on the basis of where they stay. Language policy as well at schools will be much more standardized, much more inclusive, in line with the Constitution. Those are just, because I think if we are not going to tackle education and look at our citizens from the developmental perspective, we're not even going to get job creation right. We're not going to get the economy right. So I want to focus on that, education, because education is also a provincial competency. I'm a leader of the opposition. We've got to take responsibility where we are to ensure that there's proper oversight so that the government here in the Western Cape implements the Basic Education Law Amendment Act in line with the GNU that the governing party here forms part of.
Okay. Karabo?
So I think I hear your sentiments and where you're coming from. I don't think you're being selfish and thinking when the lights are on in your yard, it doesn't mean they're on next door in the neighboring hood. I completely hear you. And that's a valid desire to have, because, and that is why, as far as electricity is concerned, in the Western Cape, in the city of Cape Town, we were able to subsidize, to say in peak hours of load shedding, this metro is the only metro that was able to have the place be able to subsidize them and cushion them against them. Obviously, this is notwithstanding power cuts that you have because of cable thefts and maintenance that need to be rolled out on that. But the freedom to know that I'm from the Free State. I experience Ace Makhashule's problems all day, every day. And I am privileged that as an MP, I was able to install a Georgia tank for my mom. But next door to my mom's house, the whole neighborhood and the whole township, from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m., there's no water. Do you understand? And being able to live in a place where I can switch on my tap and have water most of my days is a blessing. And that's what we need to be able to do. And that is why you have Deputy Minister Sikholo in the Water and Sanitation Department that is fighting as hard as he can, as Phumi, to make sure that the green, what do they call, scorpions, are running around municipalities across provinces to make sure that the quality of water that is being given to South Africans is of a good quality, right? Making sure that water authorities are compliant with what the dictatorship of the law says must be the case, and holding municipal officials who fail to give people good quality water accountable. That is one ministry where we're working well. As far as public works is concerned, you are right, sir. I want to marry the two. Public works are supposed to, I remember my grandmother grew up in apartheid South Africa. And for me, at first it was cringy hearing her boast about apartheid programs that she doesn't see in democracy. I was like, obviously life is better. But she's like, no, but the bottom line is, when I was growing up during apartheid, and even when I started being married and being an adult, I expected to see the yellow fleet that was operating to cover potholes to still operate today, where we have people that wake up in the morning and their sole job is to fill a pothole. So that we don't need a middleman in the form of a tenderpreneur that's going to not only overcharge on labor and on material, but do that and end up under delivering on services altogether. That way, we don't have to spend more money on recreating infrastructure, but we're able to maintain it at a cheaper cost, and we're able to refocus money on other service delivery programs. And that is part of what Dean McPherson is focusing on right now, making sure that we have the current set of buildings that we have that have been neglected to be maintained and repurposed for goods, for good projects such as one, GBV shelters,
Karabo, I'm
and
going to
that
stop
number
you there because
two,
you've now had two. He had one.
student
and
accommodation.
So I'm gonna stop you there and move to Mkhuleko.
Very briefly, and I hear your sentiments. Where I would want to implore you is to actually care about what happens in Parliament. I think it's key, because the decisions that are taken there have got a material and direct impact on your life. In this context, public participation must be encouraged in laws and legislation and legislative processes that are presented, whether it's amendment bills or whatever. I want to agitate for an active citizenry that has a keen eye on what happens. I know what the plenary of the House has done, the chaos of the shouting. It has demotivated South Africans because, well, that's where the cameras are. But the spade work of Parliament is in the committees. And the issues which are of interest to you, the issues which you want to see change in, focus on those committees to actually be able to make a meaningful difference. And what do you want to achieve? So you said 3, but she said must give 1. We're going to get PRASA right. That's my commitment. We are going to get the trains working, and Minister Creasy and I are very focused on the importance of road to rail, not just on passenger commute, but on logistics, to de-risk our roads, decongest our roads, so that we can sustain the infrastructure which bears the brutal brunt of overloading because of trucks, because of too many vehicles on our roads. So a priority focus, particularly in this province for us, is to ensure that we get PRASA right. And when you speak about Yellow Fleet, the Provincial Road Maintenance Grant, which is part of our ecosystem, we are revamping that in the department and reconfiguring it to make sure that we are going to have a yellow fleet, yellow plant component to give capacity to municipalities, reconfigure the Valazonke project, which focuses on Porto, so that Sanral does not perform functions which it was not intended to be. We are working with higher education and piloting with the Central University of Technology on a skills upliftment program of the EPWPs to be able to be, because they're all over the country, to be able to respond to portals with the necessary skill set, material, and infrastructure which needs to be provided. But for us, that is the focus. PRASA will be gotten right in the Western Cape.
Brett.
Yeah, I want to sort of echo what Khalid was saying, that from our perspective, we are all connected. So though you are worried about lights being off and your own life, I don't think that we can live in a city, a country, without being connected to the suffering of others. And I'll give you a brief example and then explain what we will be championing for continuously in the GNU. I went to Nyanga, it's not far from here, about 15 kilometers, to a shack where a man has not had an income for 10 years. He's about 28 since he left school. And when I asked him what he lives on, he says he lives on slaughtering cats. Now, that will live with me for the rest of my life. And I want to link it to what Good will continue to fight for in this government of national unity, but there are 10 parties, so we all have to try and get around this position. Is the Section 27 of our Constitution guarantees the right to adequate food and social security. And that will be top of our priority, is to continue to fight for this SRD grant to be made a basic income grant that is a dignified amount of money that allows people not to have to live eating on cats.
I think that's a perfect place to be. So can we ask 2 more questions? Okay, we're going to ask 2 more questions, one over there, and then we'll respond to your question. And there's one on this side. Okay.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us this evening. The intimation that politicians are parents, I think, is a good one. As caregivers and caretakers of your citizens, I think the obligation is for you to be caring greatest for the most vulnerable amongst you. So what are each of your parties going to do about gender-based violence in this country? The murder and slaughter of women and children, the lack of justice for that. You have entire sections of this population who are too scared to leave their houses and are not even safe inside their homes. Load shedding, water shedding, potholes, doesn't matter because we'll die anyway. So what are you going to do? Because nothing is happening and we are dying.
Sure. Yeah.
We'll take it in this direction.
So, I mean, it's a nationwide scourge, and it's a difficult one to say, what am I going to do, or what are we going to do? But I can tell you what we have done. As a political party, we took our funding that could have gone to an election campaign when we didn't have a lot of money. But for the last 2 years, we've been running our own independent campaign that we funded, paid for advertising on radio and on social media, asking people to speak up and to use the gender-based violence hotline. The tagline is, speak up, don't shut up. Trying to break the silence around gender-based violence that people are aware of. So we've invested funding, our own funding, party funding, not a well-resourced party, directly in this campaign to try and make some contribution to breaking the silence.
Well, in KZN, we have, at the outset of this 7th administration, taken the safety and security function and placed it in the office of the Premier, amongst others, because of the urgent need of a cross-government intervention of safety and security. We have directed that there has to be a heightened rollout of resources for the police. In order to be able to respond in time, we need to capacitate police stations. We need to empower the community policing forums. We have ensured that our municipalities, they themselves redirect themselves to public care, to public accessibility for the purposes of ensuring that we push back on the frontiers of gender-based violence. So it is an absolute priority for us, and I'm pretty certain that when we go into the budget vote in the province for safety and security, it will be able to detail extensively some of the issues. In Gauteng, our MEC for e-government, Bongos Lamini, has amongst others rolled out the e-panic button as part of the response that is available and accessible to South Africans. But obviously it does require additional support, it does require additional funds. Where I believe we've got an obligation as well is on empowering social development, not just to be a grant disbursement department, but it actually has to provide the necessary care support for victims, for families, and also finally say that I've got a son, he's 13 years old, and I have got a heightened obligation more than most to raise him to understand the responsibility of society, because the perpetrators of violence become men, and they go out and do things. So when we say the first government is the home, there is also the importance of ensuring that we do not patronize, we do not create a patriarchal mindset. It will go to other things that maybe in another conversation where I will say the commodification of ilobola is a problem because it seeks to place women as a commodity. It is no longer a cultural and traditional practice of bringing two families together, but a purchase of a woman. So those are the tough and difficult conversations to break down the mind in order to understand that we are all equals. So it's a multiple set of conversations and interventions that we need to do. But practically, we are saying that our focus with the safety and security, where we are in government directly, it must be able to respond to the challenges. And I think the work Premier Ntuli is doing of being present and visible is going to help us moving forward.
I need to do this so that I can see you because the light is so. The first thing that the Democratic Alliance has always spoken in favor of is the now diluted role of the National Prosecuting Authority of this country. It's not that we're not speaking out. Some of us are quiet, some of us aren't, but a whole lot of us are talking, and we get there even when the case has been set for prosecution. Prosecutors fail us, right? Because they are either under-resourced, they don't know how to get to the finishing line, or they just don't know how to do the thing that makes the person go behind bars, right? And even when that person ends up behind bars, they come out on parole very quickly with little to no rehabilitation of their cognitive functioning on how they view a person or what's wrong with their behavior. So that's the one thing that we need to be working on. And unfortunately, we're not responsible for justice, the department itself, right? But if we were, we sure have a document as part of our policy documents on what it is that we would be able to do as far as strengthening the NPA is concerned, as far as making sure that our police officers also themselves are sensitized. They should be trained, because it is madness that you still go into a police office today, and when you get there and you complain, you're still asked questions but like, okay, did you have sex with him first? Saying yes. And then if it's the second round, obviously it's a thumbs up. It's bullshit. You shouldn't be asking me such questions. And then you get there, the question is, but Are you sure you didn't flirt your way to it? I mean, I surely can't flirt my way into being raped. And even if I said yes the first time, the minute I say no, it's a no. You shouldn't be asking me such weird questions, right? So there has to be proper training on how to have etiquette on how to view human beings. This is not a how to view girls and how to view female-bodied beings conversation. It's how to view human beings. So those kind of trainings are important. Secondary, obviously, then is to making sure that we have rape kits that are there. That speaks to a funded budget, to make sure that we have response vans and vehicles and the rooms for screenings that are important. But at the heart of making sure that we have a decentralized approach to tackling crime, which GBV is the devolution of powers that we've asked for. I can't, in the Western Cape, Premier Windy and Mayor Hill Lewis can't deal with crime 100% because they first have to go to Mkhuleko to ask for permission for Mkhuleko to do something about crime, because Mkhuluko's people, the police, are national competence, right? So if we are supposed to have a direct line of response where metros, the police, are supposed to have more muscle and more teeth that bite at the front line of crime, then they need to be resourced with the power of the police that is a national competence. That's what we need to be able to do. And if we're able to get that devolution right, then we will be able to see the trickle down of a decrease in crime that we want, particularly because we have a case study a project that we've been running for years now. It's called the LEAP Officers Program here in the Western Cape. Of course, the Western Cape, your Cape Flats and your township areas still have a lot of crime, and because this is a social problem that we have. But the truth is, even though crime has decreased a bit, having those LEAP officers there has helped a bit. Now imagine what more we could do if we had actual guns, if we had the actual authority of arresting you and the actual power that comes with policing muscle to deal directly with crime. Then we would do that. But I agree with Hlengwa, I want to conclude, that even if the state can have all its beautiful resources to track down on crime, and even if we were to bring back the death penalty, the bottom line is, which I'm not saying we should do, by the way, to be clear, but I'm saying you can do everything and anything you can do to try to hold criminals accountable. But it means nothing for me to be accountable post the act if I wasn't raised in a community and in a society that teaches me that doing such a thing is wrong to begin with.
Okay, Khalid?
Thank you very much. I think I've been covered largely by our colleagues, because all of the colleagues are part of government currently, and they're speaking to programs which the ANC government has championed before. When it was an ANC government, now we have a GNU, so it was strengthening those ones. I want to speak firstly about some of the legislation. There were, initially, even before this particular term, strong legislation combating gender-based violence. Yes, legislation is in place, but on our part, and I will admit this is where we did go wrong, is around implementation. Our criminal justice system, and we are on the path of strengthening that. We even encourage active oversight even by other political formations in our political system to hold us accountable in that regard. But coming to the issue around, yes, and I'm hearing the arguments, and it's important, around boots on the ground, LEAP officers, ensuring that our law enforcement authorities are stronger, they're able to deal with matters. And yes, it does require all spheres of government. Gauteng is doing similar things to what we have in KZN, for example, under Premier Lesufi. But this does not necessarily need to, you see, when we get it into and start linking this to devolution and LEAP officers, we face the risk again of, in the face of GBV, in the face of massive challenges, playing again cheap politics. And I think that is not what our residents want. That's not what citizens want. They don't want us to be playing the politics of federalism and separatism and all of these things and sideshows whilst we've got a crisis. Whilst the Western Cape, for example, we're sitting here in the Western Cape, is a crime capital in the world, for example. And one of the initiatives that we have done is to ensure that the three different spheres of government, and it's not devolution here, it's constitutionalism, the three different spheres of government work much more closer together in a cooperative manner. That's how we've got the district development model. That is why Minister Mkhuleko, and it's not to say that there's a competition, Premier Windy and Mayor Hill Lewis, and by the way, there are also mayors in rural areas. Crime also affects rural areas, not only Cape Town. It's not to say that here you've got this boogeyman of SAPS that's got all the power and they can't do anything as the provincial government and as the city, because Gauteng and KZN are now doing what they need to do. But there's a memorandum of understanding. One of the first things that the ANC minister, Senzo Mkhuleko, did was, and I don't like this thing of ANC minister, DA minister, but because this is the kind of discourse we're picking up here, but I think which the national minister, Senzo Mkhuleko, did, was to drive a memorandum of understanding here in the Western Cape between SAPS, between provincial government, and between the city of Cape Town. Whilst we all have our spheres and law enforcement at different levels has its expertise and its approach, they need to work together. So provincial government needs to ensure, and we're driving this, provincial government needs to ensure that SAPs are assisted. And I give you an example. When we governed the Western Cape and we're driving to get this back now.
That was a long time ago, and I'm not going to let you go
but
there.
but
No,
I'm going
seriously,
to,
I am serious about this, because let me tell you why I say that, right? Because I'm going to stop you there, and I'm going to close the panel.
But I'm making
Because I
an
think
example.
it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to stop you there. And the reason I'm going to stop you there is because I think we are sufficiently covered, and we have now gotten to a place where we've devolved the conversation to very specific things that may not be helpful to everybody else that's listening at home and also in the audience here. But I do think that it's also a good place to end. Mindful of everybody's time, and we've taken longer than we normally do, but it has been a very robust conversation, and it is a big conversation that we were trying to concisely put into as quickly as we could into very specific points that are big and small. But I think that we understand that politics is all personal. All politics is personal, and you can hear in the questions that are coming out and also in the responses that have been had. And why I think this is a good place to end this conversation is really with that, to say that even though all of these parts seem desperate in a lot of different ways, they actually all come back to the fact that South Africans and the South African citizenry, voted or not, we sit with the government that we are observing in a lot of ways, acting out sometimes, but acting in a particular way that we are watching and unfolding, and as some of the people and some of the questions that have arisen today, it really is uncharted territory for all of you and for all of us. And so I'll thank you for being candid, for being honest with us, and also for the time that you have shared with us and your attention. And I really do hope that conversations like this, that are not loud, that are not contentious, that are not fighting, can be had more often by more people, by more citizens, so that we can understand each other a little bit more and hopefully find each other and work towards a better South Africa that works for all of us, individually and collectively. So thank you very much.
Thank you.